Hello and welcome to Views from the Market, mid-market private equity and M&A in Canada. My name is Mario Negro and I'm a partner in the private equity and M&A group at Stikeman, Elliott. For today's podcast, I'd like to welcome our guest, Eric Silver. Eric is the managing director of Riverdale Poultry. Eric, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Mario, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Eric, you have a great story and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. I thought we'd start a little bit about you, about your history. Tell us a little bit about Riverdale Poultry and how you founded and grew it.
Yeah. So look, I'm pretty boring. I grew up in Toronto. I grew just north of the city in Thornhill. My dad's an entrepreneur. My grandparents are both entrepreneurs. Nobody had big businesses, but I had like entrepreneurship running through my veins. And anyways, had all these Mickey Mouse businesses in elementary school and high school. And then I ended up at business school at the University of Western Ontario, where the first day they tell you, look, you're either going to be a management consultant, an investment banker, or a loser. And I'm not a loser. Wasn't smart enough to be a consultant. So I took a job in investment banking, did that for a few years at CIBC, loved my investment banking experience. But what I really wanted to do was work with businesses. And so I thought I should take a job in private equity where I could work with companies. So I took a job at CPP Investment Board in their direct private equity group in 2008. The world was falling apart. And I worked for a really cool employer because we had all the money and, people were really scared. But what I really learned at CPP was that a few things. One is like more leverage in a private equity deal does not always equal more return, and revenue can decline from one year to the next, which most people in private equity didn't know that for the 10 years prior. And so it was one of the things I learned. The other thing I learned is that when you work in private equity at a big firm, you don't really get to work with businesses. We were kind of like sitting on the board and we're just capital providers, but I really yearned for that. And one of the inspirations I had for working with businesses was, I'd co-founded an education technology firm called My Blueprint when I graduated from undergrad. By the way, Mario, we just had our 20th anniversary on that business last week, which is just crazy. It means I'm old, a lot of gray hair, and also lots of great stories. But while I was working on Bay Street, I would call my partner there at 10 o'clock at night every night and say, hey, what happened today? And he would tell me, hey, this idea we had, it worked or it didn't. And I contrasted that to working in banking and working in private equity. I didn't get any of that. And there was no actually trying stuff with businesses. I had this grand plan of why don't I take the skills that I learned on Bay Street and why don't I go and buy small companies with those skills? But we can apply these big business analytics to these small companies where we can actually have an impact on the businesses, just like we did with My Blueprint. And so I managed to convince someone who I worked with at CPP, his name is Prasanna Ranganathan. We call him PR, and he is the smartest person anyone's ever met, to leave the firm and go and start a private equity firm with me. Or we could go and buy small businesses, or we could pay much lower multiples than we were paying at the big private equity firm to buy them. And these businesses, were much lower stages in their professionalization that we'd be able to add value to those businesses. And anyway, I managed to sucker him into leaving his big fancy job on Bay Street. In June of 2013, we left to get started with a firm that at the time we didn't have a name, but we thought, what's more important than a name is a deal. So we went out and we found our first deal, which was Riverdale Poultry, the largest live poultry transportation firm in the country. I was exclusively in Ontario, headquartered in Elmira. And we found this deal. We were so lucky. Everyone, be nice to the people that you work with and have a good reputation, because the first guy that I ever worked for at CIBC knew that we were looking to buy businesses. And he called me and said, hey, I've just been hired by the firm that owns the Butterball turkey processing plant in Hanover, Ontario, to sell that plant. And, it was a much bigger company than we were ever going to be able to buy. But when he went in there to start writing the CIM, what he realized is that company had acquired Riverdale Poultry 10 years prior. And the reason that company bought Riverdale Poultry, which, by the way, that company was like a 12% revenue of Riverdale. But the reason that they bought Riverdale was because the founder of Riverdale, a brilliant entrepreneur from Elmira named Walter Metzger, was coming to the end of his life. And Butterball was concerned that if Walter passed away and had not looked after his affairs properly, that maybe Riverdale would cease to exist and Butterball would struggle to bring live turkeys into their plan. And so they just bought the business and proceeded to do absolutely nothing with it for 10 years. And so my friend, who's the investment banker who's now hired to sell this business, says, wait, so why did you guys buy this business? They explained it. I said, so do you not recognize that the right buyer for the poultry processor is not going to ascribe any value to this trucking company? You should really sell the trucking company to somebody else. And, the owner of this firm says, of the processing plant, says, well, what kind of an idiot would want to buy a little chicken and turkey trucking company? And my friend says, do I have the idiot for you? So Mario, today you're talking to one of those two idiots. And we were so lucky because the seller of the plant and ultimately the seller of Riverdale was not looking to like maximize value on the sale of Riverdale. They were looking to just get a fair price for the business and sell to somebody who they thought was credible enough to actually be able to close. And so it was not an auction. There was no sim for Riverdale. We literally got an email, 12 bullet points that talked about, this is the company, this is how much revenue they do, this is how much EBITDA they do, and these are the customers, and what do you want to pay for it? And if that number is acceptable, you can just do the deal. So fast forward November of 2013, we closed this deal. And, we thought we'd show up in Elmira and we'd tell everybody at the company what they should be doing to improve the business. We were going to bring these like big business and big finance analytics to this little small company in Elmira, and that everybody was just going to do what we told them to do. But instead we were met with, hey, listen, kids, I know you guys think you know everything, and you might, but what you don't know is we don't know everything, and we don't know how to do the stuff you're asking us to do. And we just don't want to do it. If you guys want to do it, you should really do it yourselves. And we were, I think, what people in your world today, Mario, would call an independent sponsor. We thought we were going to buy a bunch of different businesses. We were not going to run any of them. We had no capital. We were going to just get capital from high net worth people when it was time to do a deal. And when we showed up in Elmira and we were met with this, hey, we're not going to do that work, you guys should really do it, we didn't know any better. We just rolled up our sleeves and just started doing the work. We had rented a basement apartment near the business. We'd go to the company every day. We'd leave the company at like 5 p.m. We'd stop at the beer store, grab 6 beers, go back to our basement apartment with a laptop and a projector. And we would take turns with our laptops projecting onto the screen what we learned that day for the other person. And we'd come up with these great ideas. We'd go to sleep. We'd go back to the office the next morning and try to like execute. And Mario, like 6 months went by, which is what we planned on spending in this business. 12 months went by, 18 months went by. We looked at each other and we said, we've got a problem. Good news is the business is doing great. We've learned so much. We've added a ton of value. I mean, we made a bunch of mistakes too, but our business model, which is managing other people's money and being an independent sponsor, was just totally broken. We were too busy effectively leading this business, Riverdale Poultry, that we had no time to go and do other deals. We sat down with a mentor of ours who's an amazing, amazing person who said, guys, if you want to be really successful, just focus on one thing. Don't cheat on your deals with other deals. And we're like, oh, okay, so what are we supposed to do? He's like, what do you mean, what are you supposed to do? You already own this business. Make it the rest of your life. And we said, okay, well, great, but we don't own enough of the company to like make it worth our while. And frankly, we're sharing like a very small amount of money as our salaries because like we weren't a search fund. And he said, yeah, guys, that's why search funds exist. You should have listened to me when I told you to raise a search fund. Anyway, we didn't. And he said, so guys, like just figure out a way to buy this business from your investors and make it the rest of your life. Anyway, 30 days later, PR and I somehow figured out a way to negotiate a deal with our investors where they made a very fair return and we got to buy the business from them and make it the rest of our life. And fast forward, we bought this business now, call it 12 and a half years ago. And we made a bunch of really bad decisions. We made a bunch of really great decisions. And we made some acquisitions. We screwed up some acquisitions. We hired a lot of people. We parted ways with lots of people. We made so many mistakes, Mario. The good news is we live to tell the story. And today we own an incredible business with some incredible people, some incredible customers. And we've got a decade's worth of learnings under our belt that allow us to do what we do every day because we talk to other people who are looking at doing deals or telling us about their strategy. And we're able to say, yeah, we were there, we tried that, and we broke it in the process. And anyway, really, really grateful for all these opportunities and really grateful for the learnings that we've had. And anyway, today we're here.
You lived the challenges of buying a smaller business, the challenges of growing it, the challenges of trying to find ways in our marketplace to take it to the next level. What would you say some of the biggest challenges? You look back now and you think to yourself, what were the greatest obstacles that you came across? And just talk a little bit about how you manage them. Like you've been through a lot. And I'm curious, when you look back now, when you see it as the greatest struggle, but then in many ways, the greatest triumph because you got over it, right?
Well, I think there's a very famous quote. I'll get it wrong. Something to the effect of success is not final. Failure is not fatal. So success is not final. We are by no means at the end and we won. Every day is a new battle and every day is a new struggle and every day is a new opportunity to learn. But the biggest challenge and I won't pull PR into this, the biggest challenge that I've had is I came from Bay Street where every single person that you're working with is prepared to work literally 24 hours until they get the right answer. And then, moving over to an operating business where the people are equally smart and the people are equally great, but they're not living to work. They're working to live. And their motivation is not, hey, well, let me do the best work that I possibly can. And if you're not happy with it, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing it. And I'll work around the clock and I'll see you tomorrow morning. I think the biggest challenge for me was understanding that not everybody else was wired that way. Like Bay Street is Bay Street for a reason. And people work the way that they do on Bay Street because they're trying to like get to the next level. They're trying to be you, Mario. And that's great. But like at these operating businesses that the ETA folks are generally looking to acquire, the people aren't that way. The hardest thing for me was changing the way that I communicated to the people that worked with us and recognizing that their motivations were different. And frankly, I still struggle with this and it's not easy. And I think if I had to sum it all up into like, what was my biggest challenge? What was my biggest triumph? Like, I don't know if it was a triumph, but my biggest challenge has been people. And look, we want to do these great things. We can't do it alone. I mean, you face this in your world. I face this in my world. We need teams, and we need teams of people who think differently and diverse thought, which requires us to be chameleons and us to change the way that we operate based on who we're dealing with. And that's really hard. And that's been my biggest challenge.
I've been doing independent sponsored search fund deals for many years, and you were there where you bought your book. Was a time when no one knew what you were. People thought those are the early days of when really this all got started in terms of the volume and the activity of people like you existing. What has changed? You look back at the ability to get that deal done, find investors, raise a debt, have people take you seriously. What do you think has changed from that to where we are now in terms of the ability for someone like you, for independent sponsors, for searchers, people who want to buy a business without their own capital that need to raise capital?
You know the answer to this, but you changed. You created this ecosystem in this country. I mean, and it's like you, and you've got a group of what I'll call like the search fund godfathers of Canada, right? Who created this ecosystem. When we were looking to do this, we were looking to buy businesses a decade and change ago. And people said, so wait, you want to buy a business, you have no money? How's that going to work? And you have to go to a lender and say, hey, lender, yeah, it's cool. I don't have any experience, but you should give me money. And like I had a broker call me and say, you keep calling me. You keep wanting to buy businesses that I'm selling, but I don't want to sell you anything because you have no money. Why would I sell to you when I could sell to a firm that actually has money and has committed capital? And I actually think you changed that. This doesn't exist anymore. This stigma of the searchers are not going to be able to execute a deal, are not going to be able to show up on closing day with capital does not exist anymore. Hey, I'm sure at certain sizes, people feel that way, but like, I don't even think so. I think people who know how to talk and who are smart and who are confident can raise the capital to do these deals. And as a result of that, the sellers are not concerned that searchers are not going to be able to show up. The sellers are confident that buyers will be able to show up on closing day with what they said they were going to be able to deliver. But unfortunately, because that's the case, there are so many more, credible buyers. That means prices have gone up.
You've obviously had this great success with Riverdale Poultry, and it's a great start.
It's not final,
but you've taken that experience, and now you're looking to invest some of your own capital in other people doing this. You're out there in the marketplace looking for opportunities to put money to work on deals that look like a Riverdale or have people who could tell a growth story. What are you seeing out there? I mean, you're now with the hat of an investor on who's kind of out there looking for opportunities. What do you see in our marketplace right now? Or what would you say is the opportunity of our marketplace? And what would you say are some of the challenges of our marketplace when you look at people wanting to buy businesses like yours, raising capital, debt? Want to get your thoughts as an investor who's out there looking for opportunities.
Look, I think the opportunities are endless. If you have a good reputation and you're willing to put in the work, I think there are tons of opportunities. What I really find though is not only this will be surprising to anybody, if you live in Toronto and you want to buy a company and you look at all these searchers websites, what are you looking for? What are you looking for? And everybody's looking for something within 50 kilometers of Toronto. Look, like the opportunity set is less attractive in Toronto as a result of that. I think you do something like what PR and I did. And hey, we drove an hour and a half. We rented in a basement apartment. I put tens of thousands of kilometers on my car every year. Hey, we think there is a ton of opportunity outside of the GTA. And look, Mario, your practice is national, so you know this, but I don't think all the searchers recognize this. I think a lot of searchers are focused on trying to stay closer to the city where their lives don't get interrupted. And so I think the opportunity is really big outside of the GTA.
When you're invested, what do you look for in terms of the person who's doing the deal, the opportunity? What is your sweet spot?
Yeah, good question. We talk about this all the time. Like, could we have a checklist?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
No, we cannot have a checklist. We don't have a checklist. Look, the entrepreneurs that we come across that we think are the most successful are the ones that are really well-rounded. But really, there's two things that are really important to us that we think have been our keys to success, or one of our keys to success, which is being like financially literate and very strong analytically. That's hard to find. I think lots of people say, yeah, I took the investment banking class. I know how to build a financial model. But if when it's time for you to take notes in a document and you don't open up Excel, Google Sheets, as the kids are doing these days, if that's not the tool that you're using to write your notes in, and that's not like second nature to you, well, then we're probably less attracted to being your partner. That's one thing. The other thing is, I think a lot of people come from big companies where they're used to the IT department solving their problem with their computer, or the HR department giving them a letter that they can go and give to an employee. Or, I mean, you understand, like, I think what we find really successful, or keys to success, are people who worked at firms where they wore many hats and where there wasn't an IT department. They had to solve their own IT issues. And there wasn't an HR department. They needed to go and do their own homework to figure out what the employment law is around that specific issue that they're dealing with. And those people are generally the most resourceful. And those people don't call it quits when they don't have an answer easily. They train themselves to go and figure out an answer. And we find like marrying those two skill sets to be a recipe for success. So, we've hired people at Riverdale over the course of our years that come from really big companies. And like even people who have run departments, they're like, oh, I've run departments at other companies. Like, it's no problem. But what that really meant was they had teams and teams of people who would do stuff for them. It wasn't second nature for them to do their own work. It was second nature for them to like press this. I think it was star 5000 at CPP to say, hey, can you come and fix my computer?
I always ask our guests, I call it the crystal ball question. You're obviously active, both from an operator's point of view, but from an investor's point of view. Where do you see the market going? When you look out there in terms of kind of businesses you're interested in, the kind of investments you want to make, all these macro forces around us, where do you see the market going?
If I had a crystal ball that was clear, I probably wouldn't be here. Look, I think this market will continue to develop. And I think the independent sponsors, searchers will just like this ecosystem will continue to develop. And we're starting to see it, right? We're starting to see more and more service providers that are gearing themselves toward supporting and growing the ETA ecosystem. And so I think for searchers, it will just continue to become more mainstream and easier to do it. Hey, that said, we're seeing a lot of people, in my opinion, that are chasing their ETA moment who I don't think have the skills and experience to be successful here. And I'm sure you're seeing it too. It's like, it's become trendy. One time it was trendy to be an investment banker, then it was trendy to work in Silicon Valley. Now it's trendy to be a searcher. And so just because you've decided you want to do it doesn't mean that it's the right thing. And so I think, it becomes more proliferated as an ecosystem, I think we're going to see a lot more people who are not credible and not qualified entering the space.
I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for telling us your story and the story of Riverdale Poultry, and appreciate all your insights into the space and to the growing community. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. A pleasure to be here.
Thank you for tuning into Views from the Market. Stay updated with the latest episodes by subscribing wherever you find your podcasts or visiting stikeman.com/viewsfromthemarket.